I was standing in my driveway in Scottsdale, Arizona, staring at the survey stakes that marked my property line when a white Mercedes SUV screeched to a halt at the curb, and a woman with an aggressive blonde bob cut marched toward me like she owned the entire neighborhood. "Excuse me, but what exactly do you think you're doing?" she demanded, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. She was probably in her late 40s, wearing yoga pants that clearly had never seen the inside of a gym and oversized sunglasses perched on top of her head like a crown. I turned to face her, trying to keep my expression neutral. "I'm Philip Reeves. I live here. And you are?" "I'm Brenda Morrison, the HOA president, and I demand to know what you're planning with all these stakes in the ground." She crossed her arms over her chest, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her elbows. "I'm installing a fence," I said simply, gesturing to the survey markers. "These are the property lines. The fence company is coming tomorrow to start the installation." Her face turned an impressive shade of red. "Absolutely not. You need HOA approval for any exterior modifications. Did you even bother to submit a request to the Architectural Review Committee?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the email thread. "I submitted my request 6 weeks ago." The committee had 30 days to respond per the HOA bylaws. They never did, which means automatic approval. Brenda snatched my phone out of my hand, her eyes scanning the screen with increasing fury. "This is unacceptable. I never saw this request. Someone must have made a mistake." "That's not my problem," I said, taking my phone back. "I followed the rules exactly. The fence meets all the specifications in the CC and Arctic. It's 6 feet tall, made of cedar wood with a natural stain, and it's being installed exactly on my property line. I even had a professional surveyor come out to mark everything." "I don't care what some surveyor says," Brenda snapped. "That fence will ruin the aesthetic of our community. Desert Palms Estates is known for its open, welcoming feel. Fences create barriers between neighbors." I gestured toward the house directly behind mine. "The Hendersons have a fence, so do the Martins 3 houses down, and the Johnsons on Cactus Boulevard. Those were approved," she said quickly. "Too quickly." "Really?" "Because I pulled the HOA records from the county." "The Hendersons never submitted a request at all. They just built their fence. But I'm guessing you didn't have a problem with it because Linda Henderson is on the board with you." Brenda's jaw clenched. "How dare you accuse me of favoritism?" "I take my responsibilities as HOA president very seriously." "Then you should have responded to my request within the required time frame," I said. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do. The installation crew arrives at 7 tomorrow morning." She stepped closer, invading my personal space. "If you proceed with this installation, I will make your life a living hell. I will fine you every single day until that fence comes down. I will take you to court. I will put a lien on your property. Do you understand me? Are you threatening me?" I asked, pulling out my phone again and starting a voice recording. "Because that sounds like harassment." Brenda's eyes widened when she saw what I was doing. "You can't record me without my consent." "Arizona is a one-party consent state," I replied. "I can absolutely record this conversation." "Now, are you going to continue threatening me, or are we done here?" She jabbed a finger toward my chest but stopped just short of actually touching me. "This isn't over, not by a long shot." Then she spun on her designer sneakers and stormed back to her Mercedes, peeling out with enough force to leave rubber marks on the street. I stood there for a moment, letting the adrenaline fade, then went back inside. My wife Hannah had been watching from the window, her expression concerned. "Was that the HOA president?" she asked. "Yeah, that was Brenda. She's not happy about the fence." Hannah sighed. "I knew this would be a problem. She's been causing issues for everyone in the neighborhood since we moved in 6 months ago. Remember when she tried to fine the Patels for parking their own car in their own driveway overnight? Because it was a work truck, I remembered, even though there was nothing in the bylaws about vehicle restrictions. She backed down when Mr. Patel threatened to sue, Hannah said. Maybe she'll back down with us too. I wasn't so optimistic. I had heard the stories about Brenda Morrison from multiple neighbors. She had been HOA president for 4 years, and in that time, she had transformed Desert Palms Estates from a relaxed community into something resembling a dictatorship. She sent violation notices for lawns that were a 1/4 inch too tall, for holiday decorations that stayed up one day past her arbitrary deadline, for children's toys left in front yards. She had even tried to ban basketball hoops entirely, claiming they were eyesores. The next morning I was up at 6, drinking coffee and watching the street for the fence installation crew. They arrived right on time in a white truck with Arizona Fence Pros painted on the side. 3 guys got out, led by a foreman named Miguel, who I had worked with to plan everything. "Morning, Mr. Reeves," Miguel said, shaking my hand. "We've got everything loaded up and ready to go. Should take us about 3 days to complete the whole perimeter." "Sounds perfect," I said. "Let me show you where the survey markers are." We walked the property line together and Miguel nodded approvingly. "Clean boundaries. This should be straightforward. We'll start with the post holes today, get them set in concrete, then tomorrow we can start attaching the panels." The crew got to work immediately, and I headed inside to start my own workday. I ran a software consulting business from home, which gave me flexibility but also meant I was around to deal with whatever drama might unfold. Sure enough, I was only 20 minutes into a video call with a client when I heard shouting outside. I muted my microphone and looked out the window. Brenda was back, and this time she had brought reinforcements. 2 other women flanked her, both with the same aggressive energy. They were confronting Miguel and his crew at the property line. "I need to call you back," I told my client and ended the meeting. By the time I got outside, Brenda was red-faced and yelling, "This is illegal construction. I'm calling the police." "Madam, we have all the proper permits," Miguel said calmly, holding up a clipboard. "Everything is documented and approved by the city." "I don't care about city permits. This community has rules." Brenda turned to her companions. "Sandra, call the non-emergency line. Jennifer, start taking pictures for the violation notice." I walked up to the group. "Ladies, you need to leave my property, now." "We're not on your property," Brenda said smugly. "We're on the HOA common area." "No, you're not," I said, pointing to the survey stakes. "The common area ends at the sidewalk. Everything from the sidewalk to those markers is my private property. You're trespassing." Sandra, a thin woman with short dark hair, was already on her phone. "Yes, I need to report illegal construction at 4257 Seguero Drive." I pulled out my own phone and showed the permits to everyone. "Miguel is correct. We have all the city permits. The construction is completely legal. And Brenda, you know the HOA approval already went through by default." "That's not valid," Brenda insisted. "The Architectural Review Committee never actually reviewed your plans." "Because they didn't respond within 30 days, I said. "That's literally in your own bylaws. Section 7, paragraph 3. Would you like me to read it to you?" Jennifer, the third woman who had been quietly taking pictures, finally spoke up. "Brenda, maybe we should check with the HOA attorney before we push this further." "We don't need an attorney," Brenda snapped. "The rules are clear." "Actually, I think Jennifer is right," I said. "You should definitely consult with your attorney. And while you're at it, You might want to ask them about the penalties for harassment and unlawful interference with legal property improvements. A Scottsdale police cruiser pulled up to the curb, and a young officer got out. He looked at the crowd of people gathered around the fence line with obvious confusion. "Someone called about illegal construction," he asked. "That was me," Sandra said. "These men are building a fence without proper approval." The officer looked at Miguel. "Do you have permits?" Miguel handed over the clipboard without a word. The officer reviewed everything carefully, then handed it back. "Everything looks in order here. City permits are valid and current." "But the HOA didn't approve it," Brenda protested. "Madam, that's a civil matter between you and the homeowner," the officer said. "As far as the city is concerned, this construction is completely legal. If you have an issue with HOA rules, you'll need to take it up through your normal channels." He turned to me. "Are these women bothering you, sir?" "They're trespassing on my property and interfering with legal construction," I said. "I've asked them to leave multiple times." The officer nodded and turned back to Brenda and her companions. "Ladies, you need to leave this property now. If you don't, I can cite you for trespassing." Brenda looked like she wanted to argue, but Sandra grabbed her arm. "Come on, we'll figure this out another way." They retreated to the sidewalk and Brenda pointed at me. "You're going to regret this, Philip. I promise you that." The officer waited until they had gotten into their cars and driven away before turning back to me. "You might want to document everything that happens with these folks. Keep records of all interactions. HOA disputes can get messy." "Already doing that," I assured him. "I've been recording everything." After the officer left, Miguel and his crew got back to work. I apologized for the disruption, but Miguel just laughed. "Man, we deal with HOA drama all the time. Yours isn't even in the top 10 craziest situations we've seen." Last month, we had a president actually try to physically remove fence posts while we were installing them. "What happened?" I asked. "Homeowner filed assault charges. The HOA president ended up resigning." Miguel picked up his post hole digger. "Don't worry about us. We'll get this done. Just keep those ladies away if you can." I went back inside, but I couldn't focus on work. I kept watching the window, expecting Brenda to return with some new tactic. Instead, something else arrived at 2 in the afternoon. A courier with a certified letter. The envelope was from Desert Palms Estates HOA, and inside was a formal violation notice. According to the letter, I was in violation of Section 12, subsection of the CC and Articles for unauthorized exterior modifications. The fine was $200 per day until the violation was corrected, and I had 5 days to respond before the HOA would pursue legal remedies. I took pictures of the letter and immediately sent everything to my attorney, Marcus Chen, who I had put on retainer specifically because I knew dealing with this HOA would eventually require legal help. Marcus called me back within an hour. "This is complete garbage. They have no grounds for these fines. Your approval was automatic after they failed to respond." "Can they actually put a lien on my property like Brenda threatened?" I asked. "They can try, but it won't hold up in court." "The problem is that fighting a lien costs time and money even when you're in the right. That's what they're counting on. They want to make this so expensive and annoying that you'll just give up and remove the fence." Marcus paused. "How much do you want this fence, Philip?" "It's not about the fence anymore," I said. "It's about the principle. I did everything right. I followed every rule. And now this woman is trying to bully me into backing down." "Then we fight," Marcus said. "I'll draft a response to this violation notice. We'll cite the automatic approval clause and make it clear that any fines or liens will be challenged. I'll also send a cease and desist letter warning them about harassment." "Do it," I said. That evening, Hannah and I sat on our back patio, watching the sun set over the desert landscape. The post holes for the fence were dug, and the posts were set in concrete, curing overnight. "Are we making a mistake?" Hannah asked quietly. "Maybe we should just take the fence down and resubmit the application. Go through the proper channels even if Brenda should have responded the first time. If we back down now, she'll know she can push us around forever," I said. "Every time we want to make any change to our own property, she'll find a way to block it or make our lives miserable. I've talked to the other neighbors. The Patels, the Johnsons, the Ramirez family. They've all dealt with her power trips. Someone needs to stand up to her." "I know," Hannah said. "I just worry about what this is going to cost. Not just money, but stress and time. Marcus thinks we have a solid case. And honestly, the more Brenda pushes this, the more ammunition we have for a harassment claim." The next morning, the fence crew was back at 7. By noon, they had most of the panels installed along the back property line. The fence looked exactly as I had envisioned: clean, professional, and perfectly aligned with the survey markers. I was working in my home office when my doorbell rang at 1:30. Through the window, I saw a man in a cheap suit standing on my porch. My gut told me this wasn't going to be pleasant. I opened the door. "Can I help you, Philip Reeves?" he asked. "That's me." He handed me a manila envelope. "You've been served." Then he turned and walked back to his car. Inside the envelope was a lawsuit. The Desert Palms Estates Homeowners Association was suing me for breach of contract, seeking an injunction to stop the fence installation and damages of $50,000 for diminished property values and harm to community aesthetics. I called Marcus immediately. "They're suing me." "I just got served with a copy too," Marcus said. He sounded more amused than concerned. "This is incredibly stupid on their part. They're going to lose, and they're going to lose badly, but it does complicate things short term." "How so?" "They're asking for a temporary restraining order to stop the fence installation while the lawsuit proceeds. There will be a hearing in about a week. The judge will decide whether you have to halt construction until the case is resolved." "Can we win that hearing?" I asked. "Absolutely. We have the bylaws on our side. We have your documented request and their failure to respond. We have city permits. But we need to prepare thoroughly. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning? We should go over everything." After hanging up with Marcus, I went outside to talk to Miguel. "There's a lawsuit now. They might get a court order to stop the work." Miguel wiped sweat from his forehead. "When would that happen? Maybe a week, maybe longer." "We can have this finished in 3 days if we push hard," Miguel said. "We'll work longer hours. Get it done before any court order comes through." "I don't want to put you guys in a bad position," I said. "Mr. Reeves, until a judge says otherwise, you have every legal right to build this fence. We're going to finish the job." Miguel grinned. "Besides, I really don't like HOA bullies." True to his word, Miguel and his expanded crew worked until dark that day and started again at dawn the next morning. By the time I left for my meeting with Marcus, the fence was more than 70% complete. Marcus's office was in downtown Scottsdale, in a sleek building with views of Camelback Mountain. He had documents spread across his conference table when I arrived. "I've been doing some digging into your HOA," Marcus said, "and I found some very interesting things. First, Brenda Morrison has been violating the bylaws herself. She's been making unilateral decisions without board votes. She's been issuing fines without proper notice procedures. And most importantly, she's been selectively enforcing rules." "How does that help us?" I asked. "It establishes a pattern of abuse of power. When we get to court, we're not just defending your fence. We're exposing systematic mismanagement of the HOA. I've already reached out to some of your neighbors who have had issues with Brenda. Several are willing to testify. Like who? Mr. Patel is eager to talk about how Brenda tried to ban his work truck, despite no bylaw supporting it. The Ramirez family was fined $5,000 for painting their house a color that was literally on the approved color list. And the Johnsons received violation notices for their children's playground equipment, which again isn't mentioned anywhere in the CC and RTCS. Marcus tapped his papers. We're going to bury them. The hearing for the temporary restraining order was scheduled for the following Tuesday in Maricopa County Superior Court. By Monday evening, the fence was complete. Every panel installed, every post secured, the gate hung and functioning perfectly. It looked fantastic. Tuesday morning, I put on my best suit and met Marcus at the courthouse. Brenda was there with the HOA attorney, a tired-looking man in his 60s named Gerald Winters. Brenda kept shooting hostile glances at me while we waited in the hallway. When we entered the courtroom, Judge Rebecca Morrison, no relation to Brenda, was already reviewing documents. She was a woman in her early 50s with sharp eyes and no-nonsense demeanor. "Let's get started," Judge Morrison said. "Mr. Winters, you're seeking a temporary restraining order to halt construction of a fence, but I'm looking at the photographs and the fence appears to be already complete." "It is, Your Honor," Gerald Winters said, standing. "But we're asking that the defendant be ordered to remove the fence until this matter can be properly litigated." "On what grounds?" the judge asked. "The fence was installed without proper HOA approval, in violation of the community's CC and RTCS and bylaws." "Mr. Chen." The judge looked at Marcus. Marcus stood and handed up a thick folder. "Your Honor, Mr. Reeves submitted his fence application to the HOA Architectural Review Committee on March 15th. Per the HOA bylaws, which I've included in my submission, the committee has 30 days to respond. They never did. Section 7, paragraph 3 of the bylaws clearly states that failure to respond within 30 days constitutes automatic approval. The committee never received the application, Winters argued. "We have email receipts showing it was sent to the committee email address and opened by multiple recipients," Marcus countered. "The HOA's failure to process the application properly is not Mr. Reeves's problem." Judge Morrison read through the documents. "Mr. Winters, do you dispute that this automatic approval clause exists in the bylaws?" "No, Your Honor, but the intent was never to allow completely unrestricted construction." "The intent doesn't matter. The bylaw is clear." The judge looked at more papers. "I also see that Mr. Reeves obtained all proper city permits and had a professional survey done to ensure the fence is on his property line. The fence meets all specifications in the CC and RTCS regarding height, materials, and appearance. What exactly is the HOA's objection?" Winters seemed flustered. "The objection is to the process, Your Honor. The HOA president believes exceptions should not be made. This isn't an exception. This is following the rules as written." Judge Morrison set down the papers. "I'm denying the request for a temporary restraining order. The fence was legally installed per the HOA's own bylaws and with all proper city permits. This lawsuit is without merit, and I encourage the parties to resolve this matter without further court involvement." She looked directly at Winters. "Mr. Winters, you may want to advise your client that continuing this litigation could result in sanctions if the court determines it to be frivolous." I saw Brenda's face turn purple from across the courtroom. She started to stand up, but Winters grabbed her arm and whispered urgently to her. Outside the courthouse, Marcus was grinning. "That went even better than I hoped. The judge basically told them they're going to lose if they keep pushing." "Will they drop the lawsuit?" I asked. If they're smart, yes. But my experience with HOA disputes is that pride often overrides common sense. Marcus closed his briefcase. Be prepared for them to escalate in other ways. Brenda Morrison doesn't strike me as someone who accepts defeat gracefully. Marcus was right. Over the next 2 weeks, I received violation notices for increasingly absurd reasons. My trash cans were allegedly visible from the street. They weren't. My mailbox needed repainting. It had been painted 2 months earlier. My landscaping rocks were the wrong color. There was no bylaw specifying rock colors. Each violation came with a $200 fine. I documented everything and forwarded it all to Marcus, who compiled it into a growing harassment case. Meanwhile, several of my neighbors reached out to thank me for standing up to Brenda. Mr. Patel brought over homemade samosas. The Johnsons invited Hannah and me to dinner. Even people I had never spoken to before stopped me during evening walks to offer support. "You're a hero in this neighborhood," Mrs. Ramirez told me one evening. "People have been afraid to challenge Brenda for years, but now they see it can be done." What I didn't expect was for that support to turn into action. 3 weeks after the court hearing, I received an email from Jennifer, one of the women who had been with Brenda during the initial fence confrontation. The subject line read, "I owe you an apology." The email explained that Jennifer had been on the HOA board for 2 years and had gradually realized that Brenda was running the organization like a personal fiefdom. She had gone along with it out of fear and a desire to avoid conflict. But watching Brenda's vendetta against me had been a wake-up call. "Several of us on the board are calling for a special meeting," Jennifer wrote. "We're going to ask for Brenda's resignation. I wanted you to know and to say I'm sorry for how I treated you. You were right about everything." The special meeting was scheduled for a Thursday evening at the community center. Hannah and I arrived early and found the parking lot already packed. The meeting room was standing room only, filled with homeowners who had clearly come to watch the drama unfold. Brenda sat at the front table with the 4 other board members, Jennifer, Sandra, and 2 men I didn't know named Tom and David. Brenda's face was tight with tension. Jennifer called the meeting to order. "Thank you all for coming. We've called this special session to address concerns about HOA management and leadership." She glanced at Brenda. "Several board members and numerous homeowners have raised issues about selective enforcement of rules, abuse of authority, and harassment of residents." "This is ridiculous," Brenda interrupted. "This meeting is out of order." "No, it isn't," Tom said. He was a middle-aged man with graying hair and glasses. "We followed proper procedures. This meeting was properly noticed and called." For the next 90 minutes, homeowners stood up one by one to share their experiences with Brenda's leadership. Mr. Patel described the work truck situation. The Ramirez family detailed their $5,000 fine for an approved paint color. The Johnsons talked about being told to remove their children's swing set. A dozen other families shared similar stories of petty fines, selective enforcement, and retaliatory harassment. When it was my turn, I kept it brief. I followed every rule. I did everything right. And Brenda Morrison tried to destroy me for it. She threatened me, she harassed my construction crew, she filed a frivolous lawsuit, and she issued hundreds of dollars in fake violations because I dared to stand up to her. This isn't leadership. This is tyranny. The room erupted in applause. Brenda stood up, her face red with rage. "You're all ungrateful. I have dedicated 4 years to this community. I've maintained property values. I've kept standards high." "You've terrorized people," Sandra said quietly. "Brenda, I've been your friend for years, but I can't support this anymore." "You've gone too far." Jennifer cleared her throat. We're calling for a vote of no confidence in Brenda Morrison as HOA president. All in favor. 3 hands went up. Jennifer, Tom, and David. Sandra hesitated, then slowly raised her hand too. The motion passes, Jennifer said. Brenda, you're removed as president effective immediately. Brenda grabbed her purse and stood. You're all making a huge mistake. This community will fall apart without me. She looked at me with pure venom. And you, Philip Reeves, you've destroyed everything I built. No, I said calmly. I just refuse to let you destroy me. Brenda stormed out, and the room sat in stunned silence for a moment before people started clapping again. Jennifer was elected as the new president, and her first action was to formally ratify my fence approval and void all the bogus violations Brenda had issued. After the meeting, dozens of neighbors came up to shake my hand or hug me. It felt surreal. I had just wanted to install a fence, and somehow I had sparked a revolution. But the story wasn't over yet. 2 days after the meeting, I received a call from Marcus. We have a problem, or rather, the HOA has a problem and it might affect you. What now? I asked. One of your neighbors, the Patels, they decided to do an audit of the HOA finances. They have a right to request this as homeowners, and they found some irregularities. What kind of irregularities? The kind that involve missing money. About $40,000 over the past 3 years. Money that was supposed to go toward community maintenance and reserves, but appears to have been diverted. My stomach sank. You think Brenda was embezzling? I'm not saying anything definitively yet, but Mr. Patel has contacted the Arizona Attorney General's office. They're opening an investigation. The investigation moved quickly. Within a week, forensic accountants were combing through the HOA's financial records. It turned out the missing money was even worse than initially thought. Over 4 years, nearly $75,000 had been siphoned from HOA accounts through fake vendor invoices and padded expense reports. Brenda had been careful, but not careful enough. She had created several shell companies with names like Desert Property Services and Arizona Landscape Solutions that existed only on paper. The HOA had been paying these companies for work that was never actually performed. The money had ultimately flowed into accounts controlled by Brenda. When the police showed up at Brenda's house to execute a search warrant, Hannah and I watched from our front porch. Several neighbors gathered on the street, talking in hushed voices. Brenda was led out in handcuffs, still wearing her yoga pants and looking shocked that this was actually happening. She was charged with embezzlement, fraud, and theft. The local news picked up the story, running segments about the HOA president who had terrorized her community while stealing from it. My fence became a symbol of the resistance, and I gave several interviews explaining how standing up to a bully had exposed corruption. The trial took place 6 months later. I attended several days of testimony, watching as prosecutors laid out the paper trail of Brenda's theft. She had used the stolen money for vacations, shopping sprees, and home renovations. Her defense attorney tried to argue that the HOA accounting was simply disorganized and that the discrepancies were honest mistakes, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury found her guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 5 years in prison and ordered her to repay every penny she had stolen, plus penalties and interest. After the sentencing, Mr. Patel found me in the courthouse hallway. "None of this would have come to light if you hadn't stood up to her," he said. "Your fence saved this community in more ways than one." "I just wanted to protect my property," I said. "But I'm glad something good came from all of this." Life in Desert Palms Estates changed dramatically after Brenda's arrest. Jennifer proved to be a fair and reasonable HOA president. She streamlined the approval process for property modifications, eliminated most of the petty rules that had no real purpose, and focused the board's energy on actual community improvements rather than nitpicking homeowners. The lawsuit against me was dropped, of course. The HOA even issued a formal apology and reimbursed me for my legal fees. Several neighbors who had been living in fear of Brenda finally made improvements to their properties that they had been putting off for years. My fence became something of a local landmark. People driving through the neighborhood would point it out as the fence that took down a tyrant. It was both amusing and a little embarrassing, but I couldn't deny that I was proud of what it represented. About a year after everything settled down, Hannah and I were sitting in our backyard, enjoying the privacy that our fence provided, when she turned to me with a smile. "You ever regret not just backing down when Brenda first confronted you?" she asked. I thought about it for a moment. No. Because it wasn't really about the fence. It was about standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. If I had backed down, Brenda would still be terrorizing people, and she'd probably still be stealing money. "You know, half the neighborhood wants to nominate you for the HOA board now," Hannah said. "Absolutely not," I laughed. "I've had enough HOA drama to last a lifetime. I just want to enjoy my property in peace." And for the most part, that's exactly what happened. The fence stood strong and straight, marking my property line perfectly. Kids played in the yard without random violation notices showing up. I made changes to my landscaping without submitting formal requests for every single plant. The community functioned the way an HOA should, maintaining common areas and protecting property values without turning into an authoritarian nightmare. I did run into Brenda one more time, about 3 years later. She had been released early for good behavior and was at a grocery store in Scottsdale. We made eye contact across the produce section, and I saw her freeze. For a moment, I thought she might confront me, dredge up all the old anger. Instead, she looked away and quickly left the store. I realized that she had lost everything: her power, her reputation, her freedom for a time, and her place in the community. I didn't feel triumph or satisfaction. I just felt sad that someone had let their need for control destroy their life. When I got home from the store, I walked the perimeter of my property, checking the fence like I did periodically. It had weathered well, the cedar aging to a beautiful silver gray. Some of the panels needed minor repairs, but overall it was still solid. I thought about everything that fence represented. It was a boundary, yes, but also a symbol of personal rights and the importance of standing your ground against injustice. It had cost me stress, time, and money to defend it. But in doing so, I had helped free an entire community from a corrupt tyrant. The sun was setting over the desert, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. I could hear my neighbors on both sides enjoying their own yards, talking and laughing. The sound of children playing echoed from down the street. Someone was grilling, the smell of mesquite smoke drifting on the evening breeze. This was what a neighborhood should feel like. Safe, peaceful, free from fear of petty tyrants with clipboards and vindictive streaks. My fence had helped create this reality, even though all I had wanted was a little privacy and security. Marcus called me a few weeks later with a final update. The HOA has settled its civil suit against Brenda. They recovered about 60% of the stolen money through seizure of her assets. "It's not everything, but it's something." "Is she still in Arizona?" I asked. "No, she moved to California to live with her sister, probably trying to start over somewhere nobody knows her story." Marcus paused. "You know, in all my years practicing law, I've never seen a single property dispute lead to this many consequences. You should write a book." "I think I'll just enjoy my fence," I said, and that's exactly what I did. Years passed and life in Desert Palms Estates continued peacefully. The HOA functioned properly under responsible leadership. Property values increased. Neighbors helped each other instead of reporting each other for trivial violations. My fence required occasional maintenance, replacing a panel here, reinforcing a post there, applying fresh stain every few years. Each time I worked on it, I remembered that crazy period when a simple home improvement project turned into a battle against corruption and abuse of power. Hannah and I eventually added a pergola to the backyard, with climbing roses that bloomed spectacularly each spring. We hosted barbecues and pool parties, and our fence ensured privacy for our guests. We planted a garden along the fence line, and the vegetables thrived in the Arizona sun. The Patels remained good friends, and Mr. Patel never let me forget that my fence had been the catalyst for exposing Brenda's crimes. "You are a hero," he would say every time we had dinner together, usually while pressing more samosas on me. Jennifer served 2 terms as HOA president before stepping down to spend more time with her grandchildren. At her farewell party, held at the community center, she gave a speech about how the organization had transformed from a tool of oppression into an actual community service. "We owe a lot of this change to Philip Reeves," she said, pointing me out in the crowd. "He had the courage to stand up when it was difficult, to insist on his rights even when threatened, and to expose wrongdoing even when it would have been easier to look away. His fence is a reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of resistance can lead to the biggest changes." Everyone applauded, and I felt my face flush with embarrassment and pride in equal measure. I hadn't set out to be anyone's hero. I had just wanted to install a fence on my own property line. But sometimes that's how change happens. Not through grand gestures, but through ordinary people refusing to accept injustice. As I stood there in the community center, surrounded by neighbors who had become friends, I realized that the fence had given me far more than privacy and security. It had given me a community worth being part of, friendships worth maintaining, and the knowledge that standing up for what's right, even when it's hard, is always worth the fight. The fence still stands today, solid and strong on my property line in Scottsdale, Arizona. It's just a fence, cedar panels, metal hardware, concrete footings, but it represents something more. It represents the idea that homeowners have rights, that rules apply to everyone equally, that corruption can be exposed, and that ordinary people can make extraordinary differences when they refuse to be bullied. Every time I walk past that fence, whether I'm taking out the trash or watering the garden or just enjoying the evening air, I feel a sense of satisfaction. Not because I won some petty dispute, but because I helped restore justice to a community that desperately needed it. And it all started with survey stakes in my yard and a woman in yoga pants who thought she could intimidate me into backing down. Karen tried stopping my fence installation on my own property line completely, and in failing to do so, she exposed herself as the fraud and criminal she really was. The fence remains, a testament to the importance of property rights, personal courage, and the power of communities to police themselves when someone tries to abuse authority. It's weathered monsoons and dust storms, scorching summers and cool winter nights. And it will stand for many years to come. A quiet reminder that sometimes the best defense is simply holding your ground and refusing to let bullies win.